Hi, I'm Warren Throckmorton, and this is the first episode of the third season of the podcast formerly known as Telling Jefferson Lies. Now I'm calling it The Christian Past That Wasn't, to feature my upcoming book, The Christian Past That Wasn't, published by Broadleaf Books. That book comes out May 19th. This season of the podcast, I want to call attention to the new book and the topics it covers. Principally, The Christian Past That Wasn't refers to a fictional past that is taught and promoted by people who believe America was founded to be a Christian republic. People who believe America is a nation of Christians for Christians, often called Christian nationalists, present a past that, upon analysis, really didn't happen. On the other hand, there was a Christian past that did happen. Many awful things have been done in the name of Christianity by those who settled the American continent and founded the United States. It's hard to consider America a Christian nation when one takes an unvarnished look at our history. Another facet of the book is an examination of factors which make Christian nationalism attractive to people. Psychological and social factors play a part, and I present those in the book. As for the podcast, I want to bring you episodes which examine the two Christian pasts, the one that wasn't and the one that was. Currently, in the United States, we're celebrating the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. This has brought history of the founding and colonial eras into the public spotlight. Sadly, it's also triggered many stories and embellishments about history from those who want to tell a Christian past that wasn't. At the same time, many want to whitewash history and obscure the Christian past that was. Although I won't be able to do a comprehensive job, I want to focus on the administration's efforts to present embellished and whitewashed history as the real thing. Today, in this first episode, I interview Todd Allen, founder of the Common Ground Project, a civil rights travel program that takes people to key places in the history of the civil rights movement for an immersive experience. Todd is an enthusiastic supporter of the forthcoming book, as you will see. Todd is especially interested in seeing that both Christian pasts become more widely known. First of all, thanks again for endorsing the book, and really appreciate you taking time to do that. But I'd like to hear, first of all, about your work. I know you just got back, right? Was it doing a tour?
Yeah, just returned. Okay. In the last few years, I've been doing probably about 4 or 5 trips a year, civil rights tours a year. And so I just returned from my first of 4 for this year. Traveled with a Presbyterian church from here in central Pennsylvania on a week-long experience, taking them to a lot of the key southern sites of the movement. Hard to believe it's been 25 years this year that we've been doing these kinds of experiences for people.
Well, tell me about what a typical tour is like.
Sure. I don't know if there is a typical, but, the key for me is that there have been a lot of great books written about the movement, a lot of great documentary films, but there's nothing like the power of place, being in these spaces where this history happened, and then blessed to have the opportunity, though it's become a challenge over the last few years, of being there with a lot of the veterans of the movement, the heroes and sheroes of this. And so, when you think civil rights movement, of course, you think about places like Atlanta and Birmingham and Selma and Montgomery, and we touch those. But we also take people to places that maybe they haven't thought of, like Mound Bayou and Money, Mississippi, and to Albany in Southwest Georgia, among other places. And then the one that I do in June actually ends in Ohio, in Canton, Ohio. And people are often like, oh, so you're going to the Football Hall of Fame when you get to Canton. And I was like, no, we're going to a golf course called Clearview. That this year is celebrating its 80th anniversary. Clearview is the only course in the country designed, built, owned, and operated by an African American, founded by a gentleman by the name of William Powell, who was a World War II vet, grandson of formerly enslaved persons. He grew up, as I like to refer to the North as up South, got exposed to the game of golf as a kid. When he came back from fighting for his country, was not allowed to play any of the courses there in Ohio. And so he didn't get bitter, he got better, and he built his own. And so now Clearview exists, and it's operated now. He's gone on, but it's operated now by his son and his daughter. His daughter was the second African American woman to play on the LPGA Tour. Althea Gibson was the first, and Renee was the second. And so I say all that to say that we take you to the places that you think of, but we also take you to, those spots that are very nearby and that you don't think of when you think of civil rights. But yet this history is right here, amongst us.
So we need to know the history. You're taking people to history and see history that they might not otherwise know. What's the purpose of that? Why do we need to know that history?
The late Congressman John Lewis often said that our history is a precious resource, and we've got to do all that we can to preserve and protect it. And for me, the power in going to these places, the power in knowing these stories and knowing the truth of these stories is that as we wrestle with the ways in which we've fallen short in our past, that can give us principles to understand the ways to improve our relationships and our policies here in the present. And that's really the only hope that we've got for justice. Dr. Terrence Roberts, one of the Little Rock Nine, says that what is most needed in moments like this is an informed historical perspective. And you get that informed historical perspective by being truthful about our past and truthful about our present in order to shape that more ideal and perfect future, which is again why the work that you do speaks so much, resonates so much with me.
Well, I appreciate that. We'll get that in a minute. I want to, what you're talking about makes me think about the situation we're in now with history being erased, or at least efforts on the part of the current administration to erase history. Thinking about that Philadelphia exhibit where it was the National Park Service where some of the plaques were taken down. I suspect you're aware of that.
Yes, yeah, we're seeing some interesting things in this present moment, but I tell people, we've seen this before. So these attempts to erase history, to wash over history, to even rename what we're doing, when you've got an administration that calls it restoring truth and sanity to American history, that ought to signal you right there that they're actually not restoring truth and sanity. They're taking out the truth and sanity. History is not about making you feel good and giving you warm fuzzies. It's to give us accurate understanding of the past. And there may be things in that past that do make us feel good, that are affirming, that are motivating. But likewise, I think the more painful parts of our past can equally be affirming and motivating and challenging to us in a good way in this present moment.
Well, so with that in mind, that does lead me back to the reason I wrote this book, The Christian Past That Wasn't. And I take up a lot of the efforts of Christian nationalists to whitewash the past when it comes to civil rights and race, slavery, enslavement, and the like. And so, given your thoughts, why did you endorse the book?
Well, again, I said to you, in a separate exchange, my only criticism of the book was that it couldn't come out right when I read it, because it is so needed in a time like this. As we've been saying, in this moment when this truthful telling of our history is under attack, and then you layer in this misinterpretation and misapplication of the Christian witness and the way in which it's being misused and misapplied in this moment. What you do in this text gives us a very valuable framework, eyes to see, right? Where these narratives that we're being fed in this present moment are false, but then also tools to confront that falsity with the truth. And so, very, very valuable resource. I mean, there are going to be stories in there that I know readers are going to say, "No, wait a minute, I grew up kind of hearing that. You mean that's not true?" And so and then there are going to be things that are very, very obvious that were never true. So it is just going to be a tool that those who really want to have a deeper, truer understanding of history will find themselves going back to again and again.
So why should people get the book? What will they be able to do? There's a couple of different questions. You can take it however you want to.
Sure.
But what will they be able to do differently once they have it or if they get it?
Well, one of the conversations that comes up, in the work that I do with the civil rights movement is that conversation about the role of people of faith in bringing about social change, right? And I explain it this way, that the movement is a story of faith and faith broadly, but then when I want to talk specifically about Christian faith, I'm clear with people. I'm not saying that everyone who was involved came from the same faith traditions, right, or understood the scriptures in the same way. But it's not an accident that you had clergy and congregations at the forefront, particularly in this African American freedom struggle or Black freedom struggle that then, transformed this nation. And even within that, you would hear King and others talk about all we're saying to America is be true to what you said on paper, for example. True in terms of the Constitution, true in terms of the Declaration of Independence, but also if you want to call yourself a Christian nation, be true to what the gospel says, right? And so, one of the documents that I love pointing people to is King's very first address at Holt Street to launch the Montgomery bus protest. And in that, he does this repeated phrase of "we're not wrong," and if we're wrong, the Constitution of the United States is wrong. If we're wrong, God Almighty is wrong, right? And this is taking place in a church, right? Mm-hmm. And so, when I hear those who've gone before me, particularly in the African American tradition, talk about a Christian nation, they're not talking about a place that was founded on this belief and always lived its belief. They're talking about a place that it's really more aspirational, that has said this is who we are, even though that's not who we've been. But guess what? America, this is who we're calling you to be. But it's not in an exclusive sense either. I think that's the danger. People want to claim that we're something that we're not as a nation, but then they also want to use that as a tool to keep other people locked out, right? It's like the people who are making these arguments for religious freedom, but they only want their religion to be free and their interpretation of religion to be free. So you can't be for religious freedom, but then want to shut other people out.
Yeah. Yeah, that's boy, I mean, that's today's news, right? I mean, that's what Christian nationalists are pushing for is
now you see why I wanted this book when you gave it to me to review. I was like, could it come out tomorrow? Because you do, without being partisan, you provide a lens to help us better see this current moment. Again, if we've got eyes, a willingness to want to see.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you. That's what I was going for. I mean, I really, I feel grieved by the Christian past that was. I hope that comes across, in the book
Right.
that as a Christian, when I look at the past, I feel grief for what was done in God's name.
Right. And what
And
is continuing to be done in God's name. Working in Christian higher ed, I've for 30 something years now, one of the conversations that I've long been fascinated with, and it just seems to have accelerated in this present moment, is sometimes some parents feeling that, well, I sent my child to, such and such Christian college, and now they've left the faith. And I'm like, no, they haven't left the faith. One, college is a great time. I even think back to my own experience of really understanding what faith meant to me. I've heard people use the phrase owning my faith, right? Because up to that point, I went to where my mama said we were going to church. My daddy was AME, my mama was Baptist, so we grew up Baptist. Didn't pick the church, it was already chosen for me. I knew where I was going to be on Sundays, and I knew where I'd be other days of the week. But when I got to college, this is the first time I had to actually think about, well, what do I look for in a church? And so, fast forward to now, I think what we're seeing a lot in this moment is that young people have been raised in a certain way. It's not monolithic, but young people have been raised in a certain way and taught to think about the scriptures in a certain way. And then now they're in this moment where they're watching their parents or their grandparents or their pastor endorse some things that, wait a minute, that just flies contrary to the gospel that you've preached to me all my life. And now you're literally looking the other way or giving a blessing to things that ought not be blessed and endorsed. And young people are saying, I'm done with that. They're not done with Jesus. Mm-hmm. They're done with this version of Jesus that they're seeing. Mm-hmm. And what they're seeing is people who are allowing their politics to guide their faith rather than their faith to guide their politics.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right on.
No, man, I am again, thank you for the honor of being able to review your text and then to provide an endorsement of it. I know God is going to do exceeding and abundantly with that because it is a work that is honoring. It's a work that is truth telling. And in this moment, when we've got so much distortion, so much deception, so much erasure, Ida B. Wells said the way to right the wrongs of the past is to shine the light of truth on it. This book that you have written is helping to shine the light of truth on a past that wasn't. But guess what? Gives us some direction to a future that could be.
I want to thank Todd for his enthusiastic support for the book and his endorsement. In fact, you can go to christianpast.com to see all the book's endorsements. While Todd is hopeful that the book will have religious benefits, as do I want to add that the main message of the book is that the separation of church and state is what the founders wanted. This doctrine has benefits for both church and state. Religion flourishes when church and state are separate, as does the government. So if your interest is less religious than historical or political, this book is still for you. Music today is provided by Netop. Earl's Taco Shack has been retired. Netop is a Narragansett word for friend. Same music, different name. you like the podcast, leave a rating. And as always, thanks for listening.